California's tallest bridge has nothing underneath. Imagine a bridge so tall it hovers in the sky, nearly twice the height of the Statue of Liberty. Its steel bones stretching across a canyon where no great river roars and no grand reservoir shines beneath it. Just quiet forest, rugged cliffs, and a road that carries only a trickle of cars each day. This is Foresthill Bridge, California's tallest bridge, a soaring monument that seems both magnificent and absurd. At first glance, it looks like a triumph of modern engineering. But look closer, and you'll realize it's also a monument to an unfinished dream, a dam that was never built, and an era of American ambition that ended almost as soon as it began. So how did this towering structure come to rise above the American River Canyon in the first place? And why was it built on such a scale for so little traffic below? In 1973, California unveiled the Foresthill Bridge, the second highest in the nation, rising 730 feet above the American River Canyon. Taller than the Golden Gate Bridge roadway, taller than a 70-story tower, it was hailed as an engineering marvel, a symbol of strength and ambition. Yet unlike other great bridges, it did not link cities or carry commerce. Its narrow 2 lanes connected Auburn, then a town of 15,000, to scattered foothill settlements. On most days, only a few thousand cars crossed, a modest flow for such a towering span. The truth lay beneath. Foresthill Bridge was meant to clear the waters of a vast reservoir created by the Auburn Dam, authorized in 1968. The dam was planned to rank among the tallest in the nation, its lake stretching for miles, transforming the landscape. But the dam was never built. Geological doubts, seismic risks, environmental protests, and politics stalled it. The waters never rose, the shoreline developments never came. And so, for half a century, the bridge has stood alone as an unfinished promise, towering above an empty canyon, a bridge to nowhere. But why did a colossal project like the Auburn Dam come to a halt midway, leaving only this massive bridge to stand alone? To understand why the Foresthill Bridge exists, we need to step back into the middle of the 20th century, a time when California was consumed by what could only be described as a dam-building fever. The state was booming. Its population was swelling, its farms in the Central Valley were producing food at a scale unmatched anywhere else in the world, and its cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Sacramento, were all demanding more and more water. Yet California has never had a simple relationship with water. Its climate is marked by extremes, prolonged droughts followed by sudden, destructive floods. The geography of the state only made the problem worse. Northern California receives ample rainfall and snowmelt, while the southern half of the state, where much of the population was moving, was semi-arid. The solution, in the eyes of 20th century planners, was straightforward but massive. Capture the water where it fell and move it to where it was needed. In 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, the federal government launched the Central Valley Project, a sprawling system of reservoirs, dams, pumping stations, and canals designed to do exactly that. It was one of the most ambitious water management schemes in U.S. history. The project's mission was multifaceted. Tame the rivers of the north, preventing uncontrolled floods. Deliver water to the south to support both agriculture and growing cities. Generate hydroelectric power, providing energy for homes, industries, and the ever-growing suburbs. And protect urban centers like Sacramento, which sat vulnerable at the meeting point of 2 powerful rivers. For 2 decades, construction crews labored across California. Dams rose in canyons, canals cut through farmland, and reservoirs reshaped valleys. Among the many structures built, Folsom Dam, completed in 1955 on the American River, was considered a crown jewel. It was intended to protect Sacramento from catastrophic flooding, while also storing water for agriculture and producing electricity. But within just a few years, cracks in the vision began to appear. Hydrologists and engineers realized that Folsom Dam, impressive as it was, had serious limitations. It was not capable of offering Sacramento the level of flood protection that had been promised. The city remained at risk, sitting precariously on a floodplain. There was also the problem of storage. Because Folsom needed to keep much of its reservoir empty as a buffer for potential floods, its usefulness as a year-round water supply was reduced. For a state whose population was growing by the millions every decade, this was not sustainable. So by the 1960s, pressure grew for a bigger answer. And in 1968, Congress authorized a project that promised to outshine all the others, the Auburn Dam. It was to be one of the tallest dams in America, a colossal concrete arch rising hundreds of feet above the American River. It would not only solve Sacramento's flood risks, but also store vast quantities of water and generate enormous amounts of hydroelectric power. To its supporters, it was the ultimate symbol of California's mastery over its natural environment, the capstone to decades of dam building. But, as history would show, what began as a vision of progress would soon become one of the most infamous unfinished projects in the state's history. So, when Congress gave its blessing in 1968, what kind of dam did they imagine would rise in Auburn's canyon? And how did such a grand vision begin to reveal cracks beneath its foundation? The Auburn Dam was not meant to be ordinary. It was designed to be a monument, one of the tallest dams in America, and, by some measures, taller even than the legendary Hoover Dam on the Colorado River. Its chosen design was a thin concrete arch, a type of structure that relies less on sheer mass and more on geometry. Unlike a massive gravity dam, which holds water back with its weight, an arch dam transfers the pressure of the water into the canyon walls on either side. Done correctly, this design allows for a graceful, elegant structure capable of holding back billions of tons of water with relatively little material. The promise was dazzling. Auburn Dam would offer flood control, protecting Sacramento, one of the most at-risk cities in the nation. It would expand irrigation for the state's enormous agricultural engine. It would generate hydropower, delivering electricity to thousands of homes and industries. And it would create a new recreational jewel in the Sierra foothills, a vast, glittering lake that would draw boaters, anglers, and vacationers. Developers wasted no time. Land values in the region skyrocketed. Advertisements promised lakefront living with sweeping views of the soon-to-be reservoir. Plans for marinas, vacation cabins, and entire communities were drawn up. The idea of Lake Auburn began to take hold, as if it already existed. To many in the region, the future seemed inevitable. But even as optimism soared, doubts began to creep in. And they were not metaphorical doubts. They were geological. As workers diverted the river and drilled into the canyon walls, geologists uncovered unsettling truths about the site. The rock beneath the proposed dam was not uniform or unyielding. It was fractured, riddled with joints and fissures, and varied in strength. Some zones were solid granite, capable of supporting immense loads. Others were soft and compressible, raising the possibility that the dam could settle unevenly, creating dangerous stresses. For a thin arch dam, this was especially troubling. Such dams depend entirely on the stability of the canyon walls. If the rock shifts, even slightly, the entire structure could be compromised. Engineers tried to address the problem with pressure grouting, injecting cement into the fissures to strengthen the foundation. But uncertainty lingered. Was the canyon strong enough to carry the weight of a dam this size? Then, in August 1975, a warning arrived. Near Oroville Dam, about 50 miles away, a magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck. Though the quake caused only modest structural damage, it sent shockwaves through the engineering community. If a moderate earthquake could rattle the Sierra foothills, what would happen when billions of tons of water were added to the equation? The fear was not unfounded. Scientists were beginning to understand a phenomenon called reservoir-induced seismicity, the idea that filling a massive lake could itself trigger earthquakes. The weight of water pressing into fractured rock, seeping into faults, and altering underground stresses could disturb the delicate balance of the Earth. Suddenly, the nightmare scenario was clear. If the Auburn Dam were built, and if it failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Sacramento, sitting directly downstream, could be obliterated in minutes. Thousands of lives could be lost. As if to confirm those fears, the following year delivered a disaster of historic proportions. In 1976, the Bureau of Reclamation, the very same federal agency behind Auburn, completed the Teton Dam in Idaho. It, too, was hailed as an engineering triumph. And yet, within days of being filled for the first time, the Teton Dam began to leak. Then it gave way. A wall of water surged downstream, obliterating towns, killing 11 people, and causing billions of dollars in destruction. The collapse was one of the worst civil engineering failures in American history. And because it had been built by the same agency that was promising the Auburn Dam, it cast a long, dark shadow over the project. Public trust evaporated almost overnight. Confidence in megadams, once symbols of national pride, began to crumble. Suddenly, Auburn was no longer seen as a bold solution to California's water problems. It was seen as a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. The Auburn Dam was supposed to stand as a monument to progress. Instead, it became a monument that never stood at all. If the Auburn Dam were abandoned, buried beneath fears of geology, earthquakes, and shattered trust, what then became of the Foresthill Bridge, the colossal structure built to crown its waters? Once it became clear that Auburn Dam would never be built, after the geological risks were exposed, after the fears of earthquakes grew, and after the collapse of the Teton Dam destroyed public trust, the Foresthill Bridge was left behind as the most visible remnant of that failed dream. But unlike the dam, the bridge could not simply be erased. It had already been built. And though it was no longer needed for its original purpose, to span the surface of a vast reservoir, it still served as a crossing over the American River Canyon. Auburn and the small communities in the Sierra foothills needed a road, and the bridge, however oversized, fulfilled that role. Over time, though, the bridge became more than just a roadway. It became a burden and later a legacy. Without the dam, the bridge's scale was disproportionate. It required maintenance, inspections, and upgrades far beyond what a typical rural road would justify. Yet it was too important to remove. The canyon was too deep, the alternatives too impractical. The Foresthill Bridge is undergoing a major inspection to make sure it's structurally sound. The bridge stretches across the American River east of Auburn, right off I-80. You've seen it, chances are. That's where your reporter, Placer County reporter Brady Hoblive, spent the day getting answers on why the work is necessary. So California kept it. And as the decades passed, the state invested in keeping it safe. In the 1990s and 2000s, the bridge began to show its age. Engineers raised concerns about seismic vulnerability. Ironic, given that earthquakes were the very reason the Auburn Dam was never built. In the 2010s, the bridge underwent a major seismic retrofit, reinforcing its structure against future earthquakes and ensuring its safety for decades to come. It was also inspected as part of a national review of bridges made with T1 steel, a material that, in some cases, had shown cracking problems. The Foresthill Bridge passed, though it remained on the list of structures to watch closely. So they're looking for things that you can't see with the naked eye. It's like going to the doctor for a checkup. we want to get in and make sure that everything is good with these special T1 welds. Today, the bridge still stands, not as the proud gateway to a reservoir, but as a working piece of infrastructure, carrying light traffic and serving local communities. Yet its meaning has changed. To some, it is a waste, a costly relic of a project that never happened. To others, it is a landmark, a unique structure that has outlived the dream it was built for. And to historians, it is a case study in the limits of ambition. How a bridge can outlast the dam it was meant to serve, becoming both useful and absurd at the same time. And while the bridge found a way to endure, what about the dam it was built to serve? Did Auburn fade quietly into history? Or did its shadow linger over California's water debates for decades to come? As for the Auburn Dam, for most projects, once the momentum is lost, the end is clear. But the Auburn Dam was not like most. It persisted, decade after decade, a vision that refused to disappear entirely. In 1986, nature once again tested Sacramento. Torrential rains swelled the American River, and the valley downstream became a floodplain once more. Levees broke, entire neighborhoods were inundated, and thousands of residents were forced from their homes. It was the kind of disaster Auburn Dam had once promised to prevent. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the dam might be resurrected. Politicians spoke of renewed urgency, and some called for the project to be restarted. But when engineers and investigators looked more closely at the causes, the truth was uncomfortable. The disaster was not primarily the result of Auburn's absence. Instead, it stemmed from mismanagement at Folsom Dam. Operating guidelines had not been followed, and the dam's storage levels had not been maintained properly. The flood, in other words, was a human failure, not simply a structural one. Still, Auburn's shadow hung over every discussion of water and flood control. In the years that followed, proposals resurfaced again and again. Some engineers promoted modified designs that would be less vulnerable to earthquakes. Others floated the idea of a dry dam, a structure that would remain empty most of the time, filling only during periods of extreme flooding. Each new version promised to balance the benefits of flood protection with reduced risks. But the world had changed. Environmental opposition was louder, pointing out the ecosystems and recreational areas that would be lost. Costs had ballooned far beyond original estimates. And alternative flood control measures, levee upgrades, improved forecasting, and modifications to Folsom looked far more affordable. As the decades passed, Auburn Dam's once bright promise grew dim. By the early 2000s, the project was no longer a serious contender in state or federal planning. It was more of a relic, a ghost project that appeared in debates whenever flood struck, but never advanced beyond talk. Finally, in 2008, the state of California delivered what many considered the final blow. It revoked the Bureau of Reclamation's water rights permit for the project. Auburn Dam was never formally canceled, never struck from the books entirely. But without water rights, it could not be built. It was, for all practical purposes, dead. So what does its collapse ultimately reveal about the end of America's great dam-building era? And about the lone bridge that still towers above a canyon never filled? The collapse of the Auburn Dam project marked more than the end of one structure. It signaled the close of America's great dam-building era. For decades, dams like Hoover, Grand Coulee, and Shasta had stood as icons of progress, channeling rivers into farms, cities, and power grids. To build one was to declare mastery over nature. But by the 1970s, the price of that ambition grew clear. Towns vanished underwater, ecosystems disappeared, and geology revealed limits that concrete could not conquer. The failure of the Teton Dam in 1976 shattered the illusion of invincibility. By the decade's end, the new Malone's Dam was the last of its kind, and no project of similar scale has risen since. Auburn's unbuilt dam reflected this turning tide. Its reservoir never formed, its turbines never spun, its floodgates never closed. The American River kept its course, rafters and wildlife reclaiming the canyon once marked for drowning. Yet one piece of the vision remained, the Foresthill Bridge. Suspended high above the valley, outsized for the trickle of traffic it carries, it became not a gateway to a lake, but a symbol of ambition that outlasted its dream. In steel and concrete, it stands as a ghost of what might have been, an unfinished chapter in America's struggle between power and restraint. When you stand beneath Foresthill Bridge, gazing up at its steel frame slicing through the sky, you can't help but wonder, is it a monument to what might have been, or a warning for what should never be built again? Because in its silence, suspended above a canyon with nothing beneath, the bridge whispers the story of a dream too grand, too dangerous, and too costly to come true. And if you enjoyed the ride through these mega projects, smash that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. We've got plenty more stories from the edge of tomorrow. Thanks for watching.